Homeless woman asks black man for one and his life-changing act of kindness will inspire you. It was a busy afternoon in the heart of the city. The streets buzzed with the noise of honking cars, people rushing to their destinations, and the occasional chatter of street vendors trying to sell their goods. The city, a place where thousands of lives intersected every day, was both cold and vibrant at the same time. Among all the hustle and bustle, one figure stood out. A woman hunched over on the sidewalk, her clothes torn and worn from countless days on the streets. She sat with a sign in her lap that read, "Can you give me $1?" Her face was weathered, eyes tired and distant, as if she'd seen more of the world than anyone should ever have to. The woman had been on the streets for months now, maybe longer, living from one day to the next, hoping for a glimmer of kindness from a stranger. But most people just passed her by without even a glance. They didn't see her. They didn't care to. To them, she was invisible, a part of the city they had learned to ignore. She had heard it all, the whispers, the judgments, the rude comments. People assumed she was lazy, that she had no ambition. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know the series of misfortunes that had brought her here, to this cold, unforgiving sidewalk. She wasn't always like this. She used to have a life, a job, and dreams. But somewhere along the way, life had knocked her down, and every time she tried to get back up, something else happened. As she sat there now, the world around her felt like a blur. Her sign was all she had left to hold on to. A small request for help. Something so simple that it barely seemed to matter in a world that moved so fast. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to block out the noise, when she felt something that startled her. A shadow appeared in front of her. She opened her eyes and looked up, squinting against the bright sunlight. Standing in front of her was a man, a tall black man dressed in a gray t-shirt and jeans. He wasn't rushing by like everyone else. He wasn't too busy to notice her. His eyes were fixed on her, and there was something in the way he looked at her that made her feel like she mattered, if only for a moment. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, he just stood there studying her with a kind expression. His gaze wasn't filled with pity or judgment. It was simply kind. It was the kind of look that made her feel seen. The woman's heart raced as she wondered what he was going to do next. She was used to people passing by without a second thought. She wasn't expecting anything from him, just like she hadn't expected anything from anyone else. But as she sat there, waiting for him to leave like the others, something unexpected happened. He knelt down to her level, so they were eye to eye. For the first time in a long while, the woman felt like someone was really looking at her, not as a homeless person, not as a beggar, but as a human being. She tried to gather her thoughts, but she couldn't find the right words to speak. Then, the man spoke. "I will help you," he said simply. His voice was calm, steady, and sure. There was no hesitation in his words, no sign of doubt. It wasn't just a statement. It was a promise. And in that moment, the woman felt a flicker of something deep inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The man didn't stop there. Without waiting for her response, he pulled out his wallet and, to her surprise, handed her a $100 bill. She stared at it in disbelief. A $100 bill? No one ever gave her that much money. Not even close. The most she ever received was loose change or, if she was lucky, a few crumpled bills. But $100? It was beyond anything she could have imagined. No, I can't take this," she stammered, her hands trembling. "This is too much," but the man just smiled. "I want to help. Please take it." She shook her head, still in shock. "Are you sure?" "I didn't ask for this much. Just $1. That's all." The man's smile didn't waver. "You're worth more than $1. For a brief moment, she felt a lump form in her throat. The words were so simple, but they meant more to her than anything. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever made her feel like she mattered. She hesitated for a moment, still unsure, but then something inside her broke. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, or maybe it was the realization that someone cared, even if just for a moment. She took the $100 bill, clutching it in her hands, her fingers still shaking. The man stood up and nodded at her. "You deserve to feel better than this," he said quietly before turning to leave. As he walked away, the woman watched him go. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Here she was, a woman who had spent so many days on the streets feeling invisible, unwanted, and discarded by the world. And yet, in the midst of it all, a stranger had shown her kindness. Real kindness. The kind that made her feel like she was still human, still worth something. The sound of his footsteps faded as he disappeared into the crowd. She looked down at the $100 bill in her hands, unable to believe her luck. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling that she had been seen, that someone had cared enough to do something for her without expecting anything in return. She tucked the bill into her pocket, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't fully understand. She didn't know what to do with it just yet. Maybe she'd buy something to eat, or maybe it would go towards something she needed. Anything, really. But what mattered most in that moment was the simple act of kindness that had been given to her, something that had completely changed her perspective on life. For the first time in a long time, the woman felt like there might be hope for her, that maybe things could get better. She wasn't sure how, but she knew that something had shifted inside her. The world had always felt so dark, so heavy. But for just a moment, it had felt a little bit lighter. As she sat there watching the world move around her, she realized that the man's gesture wasn't just about the money. It was about human connection. It was about acknowledging each other, even in the smallest ways. It was about showing that kindness still existed, even in a world that often seemed to forget. And with that thought, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would find a way to pay it forward. She would find a way to help others just like he had helped her. The woman stood up slowly, feeling a little less heavy, a little more hopeful. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. That moment of kindness would stay with her forever, changing her life in ways she could never have imagined. The homeless woman stood there, her back slightly hunched as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. The $100 bill still crinkled in her hands was a lifeline. The kindness the man had shown her wasn't just the generosity of money. It was something deeper, something far more meaningful. For the first time in months, maybe even years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt human again. The woman sat back down on the cold concrete, the bustle of the street fading into the background as her thoughts swirled around the man's words. "I want to help. Please take it." She couldn't shake them. They echoed in her mind. It wasn't just the act of giving that had affected her so much. It was the way he had looked at her, without judgment, without hesitation. He had treated her like a person, a human being deserving of respect. How often had she been treated as less than that? People on the streets could be cruel. Some were quick to offer pity, while others made snide comments or looked away, acting as though they could somehow catch homelessness by simply acknowledging it. But the man, the one who had stopped for her, hadn't seen her as someone to feel sorry for. He had seen her as someone worth helping just for the sake of it. And that was the part that touched her most deeply. She couldn't stop staring at the bill in her hands. The size of it, the crisp texture, it felt foreign to her. For so long she had counted on spare change, a dollar here and there to get by. But this was different. It wasn't just money. It was a message. The world hadn't given up on her. Not completely. There was still kindness in it. And that realization, that simple truth, was enough to fill her with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A cold gust of wind blew through the street, snapping her back to reality. She pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders and glanced around. People passed her by, oblivious to her inner turmoil. She thought about what to do next. Maybe she should buy something to eat. Maybe a hot meal would help. She hadn't eaten in hours, and the food in her bag was nothing but stale bread and an old apple she'd found in a trash bin. But then, another thought crossed her mind. What if she did something else with the money? What if this $100 wasn't just about her survival for the next day or two? What if it was a chance for her to change her life? The woman shook her head as if trying to clear the thought away. She had spent too long on the streets to entertain such fantasies. She was just one person, just one of millions trying to make it, trying to survive in a city that didn't care. The world wasn't kind. The world didn't give second chances. But somehow that man's simple act of kindness had made her question everything she thought she knew about the world. The woman took a deep breath, stood up, and folded the bill carefully, slipping it into her coat pocket. She glanced up at the street signs. She was in the middle of a busy part of town, not far from the bus stop where she sometimes saw people from the shelter. A few blocks away, there was a coffee shop where she could sit for a while, maybe get some warmth and reflect. The idea of food was tempting, but more than that, she wanted to be somewhere quiet, somewhere she could think. She walked toward the corner of the street. The sound of her footsteps almost drowned out by the noise of the city. As she approached the coffee shop, she noticed a young man standing outside. He was looking at her with a curious expression, as if he recognized her but couldn't quite place where from. She had seen him around before a few times near the shelter. The young man walked toward her. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I saw you sitting outside earlier. You okay?" The woman hesitated for a moment before nodding. She wasn't used to people caring about her, especially people who didn't owe her anything. "I'm fine," she replied, trying to sound convincing. But the truth was, she wasn't just fine. She was better than fine. She was feeling something she hadn't felt in so long. Gratitude. "Good," the young man said with a smile. "I used to be in a similar situation. I know what it's like, to feel like the world's given up on you." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yeah," he said, his smile fading slightly. "I was living on the streets for a while too. But something changed. A lot of people helped me. I'm not where I used to be, but I still remember what it was like. I don't want anyone to forget that." The woman couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope as she listened to him. He had made it out. He had been where she was, and now he was standing here, offering a small act of kindness to someone else. It was possible. It was possible to change. They talked for a few more minutes. The woman learned that his name was Marcus, and that he had turned his life around by getting help from a local organization that assisted people in finding work and housing. He had been out of the shelter for a while now, working at a local diner. He told her that he had found the strength to change because someone had shown him kindness when he thought he had nothing left. "You never know," he said, looking at her with sincerity. "A little kindness can change everything. Even when you don't think it can, it can. It's the small things." The woman felt a lump in her throat. Could that really be true? Could the kindness she had received earlier actually be the beginning of something? Could this be the start of a new chapter in her life? "I don't know where to start," she admitted. "I don't even know if I'm worth it." "Worth what?" "Changing. Starting over. I've been on the streets for so long. What if I'm too far gone?" Marcus's expression softened. "You're never too far gone. Trust me, I was where you are, and if I can make it, so can you." She stood there taking in his words. It wasn't just his story. It was the belief in his voice that made her think, maybe it really was possible. Maybe, just maybe, she could start over too. For the first time in years, the woman felt the urge to take action. She wasn't just going to sit here and wait for life to change her. She was going to take the $100 not just for food or immediate survival, but for something bigger. She was going to use it as a stepping stone, a sign that she wasn't alone. She nodded slowly, as if making a decision in her heart. "I'll try. I'll find a way." Marcus smiled at her. "That's all it takes, one step, and you're already on your way." With that, she turned toward the coffee shop, a new sense of determination filling her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to face it. With the $100 bill still tucked safely in her pocket, she knew that her life was about to change. Not just because of the money, but because someone had believed in her when she had lost belief in herself. The woman left the coffee shop feeling lighter than she had in years. The warmth of the coffee in her hands wasn't just a comfort, it was a symbol of something far more profound. She was stepping into a new chapter, one where she could choose her own path. The conversation with Marcus had stayed with her, his words lingering in her mind, echoing the sentiment she needed most. "You're never too far gone." She walked slowly, savoring the moment. The streets felt different now, like they had somehow changed around her, though they were exactly the same. People passed by, heads down, lost in their own worlds. But the woman saw them differently now. She no longer felt invisible. Even though they might not notice her, she knew that she mattered. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of self-worth that wasn't tied to her circumstances. Her mind wandered back to Marcus's story. He had been where she was, had lived through the very struggles she was facing. He had found a way out. And if he could do it, then maybe, just maybe, she could too. But where would she start? What was the first step? She walked toward a nearby shelter that had helped her in the past. She hadn't been back there in months, maybe even longer. But today, something inside her told her it was time. She wasn't going to wait any longer for a miracle. She was going to make her own. When she entered the shelter, the familiar smell of cleaning supplies and canned food filled the air. It was a sterile, almost cold environment, but it had always provided a sense of safety. The woman walked up to the counter where a volunteer greeted her with a smile. "Hi, how can I help you today?" the volunteer asked. "I'm here to talk to someone about getting back on my feet," the woman said, surprising herself with how sure her voice sounded. It wasn't a request. It was a statement. The volunteer's expression softened, and she gestured toward a small office in the back. "We have someone who can help with that. Her name's Sarah. She's been working with a lot of people recently who are looking to turn their lives around. Go ahead and have a seat in there. I'll let her know you're here." The woman nodded and walked to the office. As she sat down, she couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. What would Sarah think? Would she take her seriously? After all, it had been so long since she had been in this position. Asking for help trying to rebuild her life. Just as the woman began to doubt herself, the door opened and a woman in her early 30s walked in. She had a kind face, a warm smile, and an air of quiet confidence that immediately put the woman at ease. "Hi," Sarah said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah, it's nice to meet you." The woman shook her hand, suddenly aware of how shaky her own fingers felt. I'm here to ask for help. I want to turn things around. I just don't know where to start." Sarah sat down across from her, leaning forward slightly. "I'm glad you came in today," she said softly. "It's not easy to ask for help, but that's the first step toward making change. Let's talk about what you're hoping for. What's your goal? Where do you want to go from here?" The woman thought for a moment, her mind racing. For so long she had just been surviving, but now she was starting to think about a future. She wanted more than just a roof over her head. She wanted a purpose, something to look forward to, something to work for. "I want to get a job," she said slowly, her voice uncertain. "And eventually I want to have my own place again. I want to feel like I'm doing something, like I'm worth something." Sarah smiled. "That's a great start. We can work with that. But first we need to look at where you're at right now. What do you need most?" The woman thought about it. She needed so much: food, clothing, a stable job. But more than anything, she needed the confidence to believe in herself again. She needed to know that she could actually make it, that she wasn't just another person who had failed. "I need a fresh start," she said, her voice a little stronger now. "I need someone to believe in me, to help me believe in myself." Sarah nodded, her gaze steady. "That's what we're here for. I'll help you with the first steps. Let's get you connected with some job training programs and see if we can find something stable. We also have housing assistance available for people who are ready to move forward. But more than anything, you've already taken the most important step. You've made the decision to change." The woman felt a weight lift off her chest. For the first time in a long while, she had a plan. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. Over the next few weeks, the woman worked hard to turn her life around. She attended job training programs at the shelter, learned new skills, and eventually found part-time work at a local diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a step in the right direction. She used the money she earned to pay for a small room in a boarding house, and soon she had a place to call her own. Just a single room, but it was hers. She knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, difficult days, and moments of doubt. But she was no longer waiting for a miracle. She was making her own miracles, one small step at a time. The act of kindness the man had shown her was no longer just a memory. It had become the foundation of her new life. His belief in her had sparked something deep inside her, and now she was doing the hard work of building a future. One day, while walking to her new job, the woman saw a familiar face. It was Marcus, the young man from the coffee shop. He waved at her, his grin wide. "How's it going?" he asked, stepping up beside her. "It's going well," she replied, smiling back. "I've got a job, a place to stay. Things are looking up." Marcus raised his eyebrows, clearly impressed. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." She felt her chest swell with pride. "I couldn't have done it without the kindness I received. I'm just trying to pay it forward." "That's the thing, right?" Marcus said thoughtfully. "You can't keep the good to yourself. It has to ripple out. One act of kindness can change everything." And that was the moment she realized something important. The kindness she had received wasn't just for her. It was a gift that she needed to pass on, to spread to others who needed it just as much as she did. The ripple effect had begun. It had been a month since the woman had made the decision to change her life. A month since she'd taken that $100 bill and turned it into something more, something that wasn't just about survival but about living. Every day felt like a small victory, each one a testament to the power of one simple act of kindness. But the road ahead was still uncertain. She knew she wasn't out of the woods yet, and there were many days when the weight of her past pressed down on her. But each morning when she woke up in her small, modest room, she was filled with a new sense of determination. Her life was still a work in progress, but she had made the most important decision. She was no longer going to just survive. She was going to live. She had begun to realize that the woman she had been on the streets wasn't the woman she had to stay. She was more than the labels others had put on her. She was more than her circumstances, more than her past mistakes. The job at the diner had become something of a routine. She woke up early, put on her simple uniform, and headed out. The work was hard. Long hours on her feet, serving food, dealing with demanding customers, but there was something deeply satisfying about it. Every tip she earned was a step closer to independence. Every shift was another chance to prove to herself that she was capable. But it wasn't just about the money. It was the way she felt when she walked into the diner. The people who worked there treated her like a person, not as a charity case or someone to be avoided. They didn't look at her with pity or judgment. They were kind, and in return she gave them her best. One evening, as she wiped down the counter between customers, she overheard a conversation between two of the regulars. They were talking about a new program in the city, a housing initiative aimed at helping people who had been homeless for a long time find stable, affordable housing. She paused, her hand hovering over the counter. Affordable housing? The idea had always seemed so far-fetched, like a dream that other people got to have. But here it was, something real, something tangible. She could barely believe it. Later that night, after her shift was over, she did some research. The program was legitimate, offering a chance for people like her to find a safe place to live and receive the support they needed to maintain stability. It wasn't a handout. It was a second chance. It was the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for, but she hadn't even known it existed until now. The next day, she walked into the housing office and asked for an application. It was a simple step, but it felt monumental. She wasn't asking for a handout. She was asking for a chance to build a new life for herself. The process was slow and required paperwork, but it wasn't long before she received the news. She was eligible for a unit in the program. It felt surreal. She had done it. She had fought for her life back, and now she was being given the keys to a new future. The small apartment she was offered wasn't much. A one-bedroom unit in an older building, but it was hers. She could decorate it as she pleased, hang pictures on the walls, and invite people over. She could belong somewhere. And for the first time in years, she felt a sense of pride, of true ownership over something she had worked hard for. The day she moved into the apartment was one of the happiest days of her life. It wasn't just the apartment itself, though it was a huge milestone. It was the feeling that she had made it. She had taken all the broken pieces of her past, all the years of pain and struggle, and had started to rebuild her life. But even though she had made progress, there were still days when the weight of her past threatened to pull her back down. There were moments when doubt crept in, and she wondered if she could truly keep going. What if she lost her job? What if she couldn't pay the rent? What if the weight of her mistakes came crashing down on her again? She fought those thoughts, reminding herself that she wasn't the woman she used to be. She wasn't the woman who had been lost and invisible on the streets. She had changed. She was changing. Her mornings in her new apartment were simple, yet filled with a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. She'd wake up to the sound of birds outside her window, the sunlight streaming through the blinds. There was no noise, no urgency, just peace. She would make herself a cup of coffee, sit by the window, and watch the world go by. It wasn't extravagant, but it was hers, her own little space in the world. The woman spent her days focusing on building a future, not just for herself, but for others as well. She had begun volunteering at the same shelter that had once helped her, now sharing her story with others who had lost hope. She didn't have all the answers, but she had the one thing that mattered most: the knowledge that change was possible, no matter how impossible it might seem. One afternoon, as she was handing out food at the shelter, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was Marcus, the young man who had shared his story with her months earlier. He was smiling as he approached, a confident, hopeful look on his face. "How's it going?" he asked, his voice warm. She smiled back. It's going great. I've got a place now, a job, and I'm helping others. I'm finally starting to feel like I'm living again. Marcus's eyes lit up. That's incredible. You're doing exactly what I knew you could do. I'm proud of you. The woman felt a surge of gratitude toward him. Without his encouragement, she wasn't sure if she would have taken the first step. He had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. I couldn't have done it without you, she said, her voice soft but sincere. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the shelter fading into the background. The woman had come so far since that first encounter on the street. She had rebuilt her life piece by piece, one decision at a time. And now she was standing in front of someone who had played a part in that transformation, someone who had shared his own story of change with her. Thank you, she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. Marcus smiled again, his expression full of pride. No, thank you. You've done it all yourself, but I'm just glad I could help in some small way. For a moment, the woman just stood there feeling the weight of everything she had overcome. She wasn't perfect. She hadn't arrived at some grand, flawless destination. But she had come so far. She had reclaimed her life. The road ahead would continue to have its challenges. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of them. She was no longer the woman who had begged on the streets for $1. She was someone who had found her strength, her purpose, and her voice. And as long as she held on to those things, she knew she could face whatever came next. The city skyline loomed in the distance, its jagged lines framed by the early morning light. The woman sat at her kitchen table, sipping her coffee and staring out the window. Life had become a new routine. The small apartment was filled with the hum of daily life, a steady rhythm she had long yearned for. But as much as she appreciated the calm, there were still pieces of her past she couldn't ignore, memories of people she had lost along the way. Among them was her daughter, the child she had once held in her arms, the same child she had promised to protect. They had been separated for years, ever since her fall from grace. But the woman never stopped thinking about her. She had been so caught up in survival and just getting by, that she had lost touch with the one person who had always been her reason for fighting. Her daughter had been taken in by her ex-husband after they separated, and over time the distance between them had grown. She knew the years had changed things, but she hadn't forgotten the little girl she used to hold close. Lately, the thought of her daughter had been weighing heavily on her heart. She had been rebuilding her life, but what was the point of it all if she couldn't repair the bond with her child? She had failed her once. Could she make up for it? Could she fix what had been broken? The woman took another sip of her coffee and stared at the phone in her hand. She hadn't called her daughter in years. The fear of rejection, of being judged for everything that had happened, had held her back. She didn't want to open old wounds, but something inside her knew that she had to try. For her and for her daughter. She found the number, hesitated for a moment, then pressed dial. Her heart pounded in her chest as the phone rang, each second feeling like an eternity. What would she say? Would her daughter even recognize her voice? Would she want anything to do with her after all this time? Finally, the line clicked and a familiar voice answered. It was soft, cautious. Hello? For a moment, the woman couldn't speak. Her daughter's voice was older now, but it was still the same voice that used to call her mommy. It hit her like a wave. Is this Emma? The woman managed to say, her voice shaking. Mom? There was a long pause, then the voice, so much older, filled with uncertainty. Is it really you? The woman swallowed, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, it's me. I'm sorry for everything. I've been thinking about you all these years, and I had to call. The silence on the other end of the line stretched. The woman's heart felt like it was pounding in her throat. She wondered if her daughter would hang up, if she would reject her completely. But then, to her surprise, Emma spoke. Where have you been, Mom? I've been wondering about you. I didn't think you would ever call. The woman could hear the hurt in her voice, but also something else, curiosity, maybe even hope. It made her heart ache. I'm so sorry, the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was lost. I didn't know how to find my way back. But I'm doing better now. I have a job, a place to stay. I want to make things right between us. I want to be part of your life again. Emma didn't respond right away, and the woman held her breath, bracing herself for whatever might come next. But then, to her astonishment, she heard her daughter's voice, soft but steady. I don't know what to say, Mom. It's been so long. But I'm glad you called. I've missed you. The woman's breath caught in her throat. You've missed me? Yes, Emma said, I've missed you. I've been angry and I didn't understand, but I've always missed you, and I don't want to just leave things the way they are. The woman closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the wave of emotion that rushed through her. She had done it. She had taken the first step toward healing the wounds of their past. I want to see you, Emma said, a hint of hope in her voice. Maybe we can start over. I don't know how, but we can try. The woman wiped away a tear, nodding even though Emma couldn't see her. I'd like that. I'd really like that. They made plans to meet the following week at a small park near Emma's apartment. The woman felt a mixture of excitement and fear. What would it be like to see her daughter again? So much had changed. They were no longer the same people who had said goodbye all those years ago. She had changed, and so had Emma. But in her heart, the woman knew that this meeting, this chance to reconnect, was the beginning of something beautiful. The week seemed to drag on. The woman found herself filled with both anticipation and anxiety. She spent her nights thinking about the conversation they would have, wondering what her daughter would think of the woman she had become. Would Emma accept her? Would she see the changes, the effort, the growth? The day finally arrived. The woman dressed in her best clothes, a simple but neat outfit she had saved for special occasions. She checked herself in the mirror, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just any meeting. It was a chance to reclaim a part of her life that she had lost. She was about to meet the person who had once been everything to her. When she arrived at the park, she saw Emma sitting on a bench, looking a little nervous but hopeful. The woman's heart swelled with love as she walked toward her, her daughter's face lighting up when she saw her. "Mom," Emma said, standing up and taking a few hesitant steps forward. The woman smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. Emma. And then, for the first time in years, they embraced. It wasn't a perfect hug. It wasn't the same as when Emma was a child and they held each other tightly. But it was a start. It was real. It was them trying again. They sat together on the bench talking for hours. Emma shared her life, her struggles, her triumphs, the things she had been through while the woman had been absent. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of silence when the weight of the years between them felt too heavy to bear. But slowly they began to rebuild the bridge that had once been broken. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the park, the woman realized that this was just the beginning. There was so much more to their story, so much more to be healed, but for the first time in years, she felt that the pieces were falling into place. Her daughter was back in her life, and together they could face whatever came next. The journey wouldn't be easy, but they were no longer strangers. They were mother and daughter, and that bond, no matter how frayed it had become, was unbreakable. As they said their goodbyes that evening, the woman's heart was full. She had found something more precious than any material possession. She had found redemption, and she had found her way back to the most important relationship of all. The following months were a whirlwind of small victories and challenges. The woman had come a long way since her days on the streets, but she knew the journey wasn't over. Rebuilding her life, reconnecting with her daughter, and finding stability was one thing. But staying there, keeping her newfound sense of purpose, was a different battle entirely. But it wasn't one she was afraid to fight. After her meeting with Emma in the park, the woman felt a renewed sense of motivation. Reconnecting with her daughter had opened a door to a new chapter of her life. The past would always be a part of her, but she was determined not to let it define her any longer. She had a future to look forward to, and for the first time, she felt like she could truly shape it. One of the most unexpected changes in her life was the opportunity to give back to the community that had supported her. The shelter where she had once sought help had asked her to return, not just as a volunteer, but as someone who could share her story. She had hesitated at first, uncertain about stepping back into that world. But when she thought about how far she had come, how far she had climbed, she realized it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about inspiring others who felt as hopeless as she once had. The first time she stepped into the shelter as a volunteer was a surreal experience. She was no longer a desperate soul clutching a sign, hoping for a small gesture of kindness. She was part of the solution now, a living example that transformation was possible. The staff greeted her warmly, and the people who were currently seeking help looked at her with a mixture of awe and hope. She could see the doubt in their eyes, the fear that maybe, just maybe, things would never change. But she had been there. She had felt that same hopelessness, and now she had the ability to offer them something different, proof that it could be different. One afternoon, as she stood in front of a small group telling her story, a young woman approached her after the meeting. Her face was drawn, her eyes wide with the same fear the woman remembered feeling so clearly. The young woman was in her early 20s, maybe a bit younger, and the weight of the world seemed to press down on her shoulders. "I don't know if I can do it," the young woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've tried before. I keep failing." The woman looked at her, seeing so much of her younger self in this girl. "I was in your shoes not long ago," she said gently. "I've been where you are. I've felt exactly how you feel. But I want you to know something. You're not a failure. You're just at the beginning of your story. You don't have to do everything at once. You take one step, and then another. That's how you start. That's how you change." The young woman looked up at her, her eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and hope. "You really think I can do it?" The woman smiled, her heart swelling with empathy. "I don't just think you can. I know you can. I'm living proof of it." That conversation stayed with the woman long after the day was over. She realized that this was why she had come back. It wasn't just about her own healing. It was about paying it forward, about showing someone else that they could make it too. Her life had changed because someone had believed in her. Now it was her turn to believe in someone else. Her days at the shelter began to fill with these small, meaningful interactions. Every time she shared her story, she saw the flickers of hope in the eyes of others just like hers had been sparked. Every word of encouragement, every smile, every hand reached out in solidarity. It all mattered. The woman realized that in helping others, she was continuing to heal herself. But even as she poured her energy into helping others, there was one relationship that still felt fragile. Her bond with Emma had grown stronger with each passing week, but the woman couldn't help but feel the weight of the years that had been lost. Emma was still young, and though they were rebuilding their relationship, there was a part of the woman that feared it would never be the same. Emma had grown up without her, and that absence was something they would never be able to get back. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon when the woman invited Emma over to her apartment. They had spent time together before, but this time, the woman wanted to make it special. She had cooked a simple meal, something warm and comforting, and set the table with care. It wasn't much, but it was a way of showing her daughter that she was trying, that she was putting effort into their relationship. When Emma arrived, her face lit up with a smile, and for a moment, everything felt right. As they sat down to eat, the woman could feel the weight of the conversation she had been avoiding. She wasn't sure if Emma was ready to talk about the past, but it felt like the right time. "Emma, I've been thinking a lot about everything," the woman began, her voice a little shaky. "I know things have been hard, and I know I can't erase the years that we lost, but I want you to know that I'm here now. I'm here for you no matter what." Emma reached across the table, her hand gently resting on her mother's. "I know, Mom. I know you're trying, and I'm trying too. It's just, sometimes it feels like we'll never catch up. Like so much time has passed that we'll never be able to make it right." The woman squeezed Emma's hand, her heart aching. "I don't know if we can ever make it perfect, but we can make it real. I just want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here, and I want to be a part of your life. I want to be a better mother, not just in words, but in actions." Emma looked at her mother, her eyes softening. "I want that too, Mom. I really do." They sat together for a long time, talking about everything and nothing. The woman realized that there was no perfect resolution, no magical moment where everything would fall into place. Healing was a process, and it would take time. But the most important thing was that they were starting again, together. As the weeks passed, the woman continued her work at the shelter, but she also took steps to improve her own life further. She enrolled in a program to finish her high school diploma, something she had never completed due to her circumstances. It wasn't easy, balancing work, volunteering, and school, but she knew that it was important for her own sense of self-worth. It was a promise she had made to herself, to keep moving forward no matter how hard it was. One evening, after a long day, the woman sat in her apartment, looking out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. She felt exhausted but also at peace. Her life was far from perfect, but it was hers, and she was no longer running from it. She had come a long way from the woman who had begged for $1 on the streets. Now she was living a life she could be proud of, one step at a time. As she closed her eyes that night, she knew that the journey wasn't over. There would be more obstacles, more challenges to face, but for the first time in years, she felt ready. She was no longer a victim of her circumstances. She was a survivor, a warrior in her own right, and she knew that no matter what the future held, she had the strength to face it. The weeks had passed by in a blur. The woman had settled into her new routine, working at the diner, volunteering at the shelter, and slowly but surely, rebuilding her relationship with her daughter. Each day felt like another small step forward, though she still carried the scars of her past. But those scars no longer defined her. Instead, she had started to see them as a part of her story, a part of the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She had learned that perfection was not the goal. Progress was. Every small victory, every moment of kindness, every bit of effort to improve was a triumph. She had learned that it was okay to be broken, as long as you were still willing to rebuild, and she was rebuilding piece by piece. It was on one such quiet evening as she was getting ready to close up her apartment for the night that she heard a knock on the door. At first, she didn't think much of it. It was late and she wasn't expecting anyone. But the knock came again, more insistent this time. Curiosity piqued. She walked to the door and opened it cautiously. Standing on the other side was the last person she expected to see, the man who had given her the $100 bill months ago. The man who had shown her an act of kindness that had changed her life. He stood there looking almost the same as the day she had met him on the street, with that quiet strength in his eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The woman just stared at him, her mind racing. What was he doing here? Why had he come back? Finally, the man spoke, his voice calm and steady, just like the first time they had met. I know this might be strange, he began, but I've been thinking about you. The woman's heart skipped a beat. She had never expected him to think about her after their brief encounter. It had felt like such a fleeting moment in the grand scheme of things, a moment of kindness among so many others, but here he was, standing in her doorway. I'm not sure why I came, he continued, looking down for a moment before meeting her eyes again. I just felt like I had to. I wanted to see how you were doing, to see if things had gotten better for you. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. All this time she had carried that moment in her heart, the moment when someone had truly seen her. It was the catalyst for everything that had changed. And now, here he was standing in front of her, offering her something she hadn't even realized she still needed. Closure. Or maybe something more than that. I don't know what to say, she stammered, a little overwhelmed. I've been doing better, really. I have a job, a place to live now. I've been reconnecting with my daughter. They're good. The man smiled slightly, his eyes softening. I'm glad to hear that. I knew you could do it. For a moment, neither of them said anything. There was a quiet understanding between them, a recognition that the impact of that one act of kindness had extended far beyond what either of them could have anticipated. The woman's life had been forever changed by a simple gesture, and now here he was, a reminder that kindness could ripple out into the world in ways you never expected. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I don't think I ever really thanked you properly for what you did. That $100, it wasn't just money. It was the belief that someone cared, that someone saw me. It changed everything. The man nodded as if understanding exactly what she meant. It wasn't just about the money, was it? He said. It was about seeing you, acknowledging you. You don't always need a lot to make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is being seen. The woman felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had tried to explain this feeling to herself for so long, but hearing it from him, it made everything so clear. It wasn't just the money that had changed her. It was the way he had treated her in that moment. With dignity, with respect. He had seen her as a human being, not as someone to be ignored or dismissed. There was something deeply humbling about it, something that filled her with a gratitude she couldn't fully express. Where do you go from here? The man asked after a long pause, breaking the silence. The woman looked at him, her heart full. She had come so far since that day they first met. Her life wasn't perfect and there were still struggles ahead. But she had learned that it wasn't about perfection. It was about progress, about showing up each day and doing the best you could. I'm still figuring it out, she replied. a small smile playing on her lips. "But I know I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to keep helping others just like you helped me." The man nodded, his smile a little more genuine this time. "I'm proud of you," he said simply, and that was enough. For the woman, those words meant everything. They were a confirmation that her journey wasn't just something she was doing for herself. It was something that had a greater purpose. She wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was paying forward the kindness that had been shown to her. Before he left, the man took one last look at her, his expression soft. "Take care of yourself," he said. "And if you ever need anything, just ask." "I will," she promised, her heart swelling with gratitude. And just like that, he was gone, leaving the woman standing at her door, filled with a sense of peace she hadn't felt before. She didn't know what had brought him back into her life, but she knew one thing for sure. That simple act of kindness had come full circle. It had changed not only her life, but also the lives of others she had touched along the way. The woman closed the door softly behind her and leaned against it, her heart racing. She realized that the greatest gift the man had given her wasn't just the money or the advice. It was the belief in herself, the reminder that she was worthy of kindness, that she was capable of change. She had been given a second chance, and she intended to make the most of it.